Uju Elinadi Indigenous. Hello, my name is Elinadi. This video is going to be very different from my usual YouTube videos. This is going to be closer to something that I would have posted on TikTok, but it is very important and I needed to get this out as quickly as I possibly could. So I do want this to be on YouTube, and I would like you to engage with this as much as you possibly can. Election day is over. This is the current reality that I have to face and come to terms with. If you've watched my video, One Scene for Forgiveness, the Twilight Saga is racist. There is a scene towards the end of the video that I dedicate entirely to the forced sterilization of Indigenous women in both the United States and Canada. In case you didn't see it, here it is. Preventing births among a targeted group of people is literally a form of genocide that continues to this day. Indigenous women in Canada have reports of being coerced by hospital staff to get their tubes tied right after birth.
Nicole Awashish was 18, in labor and about to have a C-section when she signed a form she didn't know would prevent her from getting pregnant again.
Sometimes it was hidden during other procedure, getting an operation for her bladder, and 3 days later her doctor says to her, "Oh, by the way, I performed a hysterectomy."
She's heard from more than 100 Indigenous women in Canada with a range of allegations around forced sterilization.
This historic and cultural context is really weighing on my conscience, because with the way things are unfolding in the United States right now, the best option for myself would be to get sterilized. There is an overwhelming sense of guilt that comes with this. There is an overwhelming amount of guilt that comes with this choice, knowing that it's my choice. A choice that was not afforded to women in my family and within several Native communities. When I approach this objectively, this is what I tell myself. I am choosing to do this. I am 34 years old. I'm going to be 35 in June of next year. Not once in my life have I ever wanted children. Even when I was briefly married, my ex-husband and I did not want to have children. In my current relationship, we still do not want children. If my partner ever did, that would be reasonable grounds to leave me and to end things. And this is not something that I say lightly. Several of my dearest friends have struggled with infertility or had massive complications with carrying their pregnancies to full term. They've confided in me their hardship and heartbreak and agony of wanting a baby so badly and not being able to. That is not something that I would ever want to deny any partner of mine. They should have babies if they want them. They just cannot have them with me. Pregnancy frightens me. I have crippling anxiety, and just the thought of childbirth is terrifying. Because even when it's a choice, it is still ripping and breaking and bursting and bleeding and then having to go back to work in a week. An IUD was traumatizingly painful for me. And that is just this itty bitty tiny little copper rod that gets shoved into your cervix. Pregnancy is terrifying. Childbirth is terrifying. But at least that ends. But when it ends, that means that you are now fully responsible and committed to this new person 24/7 for the rest of their lives, for the rest of your life. This is not a commitment that I am willing to make. Not when I'd be responsible for everything financially. Not when I'm working paycheck to paycheck and can barely build up my own savings. Not when my anxiety and my depression can make me so irritable and stressed and burned out to the point where I become totally neglectful of myself. And then I'm going to have a baby on top of that. I can't do that. I am already my elderly father's caretaker. Before my uncle went into assisted living, I was taking care of 2 elderly men in my home. This was months of stress and heartache and no rest. Taking care of a vulnerable elder in many ways is like taking care of a child. I don't want to do that. Just because I don't want to have children doesn't mean that I hate children. I have young relatives that I love more than anybody on this planet. I used to work with kids between the ages of 3 and 13. I really enjoyed that dynamic. I learned a lot about myself. I learned how important it is to be there and to be present and to build trust with these children, even the ones that you bump heads with. Because even the ones that you struggle with, they trust you so much. You can't help but love them. If I were to become romantically involved with a person who had a child, that child is part of a package deal. I don't get one without the other. And I'm okay with that. I have big auntie energy. Being an auntie offers enough distance between you and the kid that you don't get when you're their parent. I can love my baby nibblings with all of my heart and watch them grow and take care of them and babysit them and play video games with them and go on vacations and outings and spend holidays together, and then I can send them home. I love children. I love children now more than I ever have in my entire life. I still don't want to birth one. Viola Davis said it best in Eat, Pray, Love.
Having a baby is like getting a tattoo on your face. You kind of want to be fully committed.
All of this sounds reasonable, right? Here's where it gets tricky. My dad and his siblings were raised by his parents and my grandmother's sister. We affectionately call her Auntie. She died before I was born, so I never got a chance to know her, but Dad swears that she was like a second mother to him. She and my grandmother were residential school survivors. They ran away together, they lived together, they raised children together, they raised grandchildren together. She was always there. Auntie was forcibly sterilized. We don't know if it was at the residential schools or if it was a doctor's visit like the one in the video clip that I shared earlier, but she was never pregnant. She never had children. She was never given a chance to have a child, even if she wanted one. A doctor decided that this Native woman just didn't deserve to be a mother. And he took it from her, whether she wanted it or not. This is something that still impacts Indigenous women in Canada and the United States to this day. In October 2024, the Canadian Senate supported a bill that would end the forced sterilization of Native women in Canada. October 2024. As of recording, this was supported a month ago. As for the Native women who do have children, know this. Indigenous children in Canada make up over 53% of all children in foster care. So even when Native women are allowed to have babies, they are still the most at risk of having their babies taken from them. Some doctors would essentially hold these children hostage until the mother agreed to be sterilized. Some Native women are deemed too at risk or too suspicious by hospital staff, so they can have the baby removed from her shortly after birth and placed into foster care. Speaking of Native children in foster care, a report was released by the Canadian Special Joint Committee on the Medical Assistance in Dying in February 2023. The committee recommended that Canada should begin within 5 years funding research and consulting minors on the topic of MAID, including minors with terminal illnesses, minors with disabilities, minors in the child welfare system, and Indigenous minors. Additionally, the report recommended that minors be able to be euthanized even if their parents do not approve. But things aren't that much better in the United States. The Indian Child Welfare Act, or ICWA, was upheld by the United States Supreme Court in 2023, so that Indigenous children would remain within their communities instead of being fostered out into white non-Native families. Even so, Native Americans are still 4 times more likely to have their children taken away from them. Even if these children are not euthanized or put into non-Native foster care, there are still a myriad of problems and other social factors that put so many Indigenous children at risk. And it's probably going to get even worse now. Considering all of that, do you see how my decision to get my tubes tied feels like such a betrayal? Not just as a Native woman, but as a Native woman who is the descendant of Native women who were hurt by these inhumane and genocidal practices. Do you understand how much that feels like a betrayal, even when it's not one? This decision, no matter how logical and practical and justified it is, still comes with so much hurt and so much pain behind it. Pain that is both mine and not mine. It makes me think about how my strong lineage that survived every attempt at genocide is going to die with me. I understand that this is a very unproductive way of thinking about it, because I know that I can still impact so many people and I can still love and care for children, even if they're not mine. But this is the current reality that I have to face in a post-Roe v. Wade world right now. This is my current reality as we enter a second Trump presidency. I do not want children. I do not want an abortion. Should either of those things happen, I know that my physical, emotional, and financial well-being will suffer for it. This is an option that I have considered for a couple years now, several years now. It took a lot of time for me to really come to terms with what would work best for me, and I thought I would have more time, but I'm out of time. It's now or never, and there is no guarantee what this country is going to look like 4 years from now and what my options will be then. Because it sounds like they also want to get rid of birth control on top of everything else. These are the conversations and personal decisions that women all over the country are having right now after this election. Do what's best for you and trust that it is the right decision. I'm going to speak with my healthcare provider about my options. You should do the same.